Hello and welcome to the Polish Cinema for Beginners podcast, a show around and about Polish cinema. My name is Pranav. I've been living in Poland for about 5 years, and I am a beginner in Polish cinema. This episode is about Polish cinema in the interwar period. For this episode, I'm delighted to invite Łukasz Biskupski, a cultural historian and film scholar from Poland, based at the University of Łódź. His research focuses specifically on the history of cinema and mass culture in Poland, making him the perfect guest for this episode. He's also the author of a book on the Start Film Society, one of the most important film movements in the interwar period. And we'll talk about that later. So, hey, Łukasz.
Okay, hello. Thank you for this wonderful introduction. Nice to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for joining us. Before we start, I wanted to ask, how many pierogi have you eaten in the last week?
Actually, none.
Really?
I know the pierogi are one of the most famous Polish dishes, but they are quite complicated to make, and it's time effort at home, and I don't like this ready-made ones because they are worse ones. So if my mother does it, I eat it. However, I really love cooking, and some of the less known Polish dishes are soups. We have thousands of hundreds of different soups, and we are really good in that. And for example, one of the most iconic one is tomato soup, which is a season for tomatoes, and that's what I ate yesterday, actually.
I didn't know, but at least it's a good idea. I don't know anything about soups. I have had some Polish soups, but anyway, we can go to a more superb topic. Something that you're very interested in. Polish cinema in the interwar period, right? So let's build up context for everyone. So what was happening and when exactly is the interwar period?
Okay, but I think we need to start with one more general thing, because you said Polish cinema.
Yes.
And when we look at this concept from the academic perspective, it gets quite complicated.
Okay.
Because what is national cinema? This idea is is it connected to language, or is it connected to the state? And if we connect it to both, it's very problematic for Poland, because before the First World War, Poland did not exist. It was colonized by Russia, Germany, and Austria. And there were some films made, for example, in Warsaw before the First World War, but they were silent. So were they Polish films or Russian films?
Right.
It's quite, and they were made mostly by Jewish businessmen.
Right.
So it gets quite complicated. That's why it's a problematic concept. It gets easier in the interwar period, with this period between the First World War and the Second World War, because after the First World War, after 123 years of colonizations of Polish lands, the outcome of the First World War, the Versailles Treaty, was to reinstate Polish Republic. So it gets easier from that point to speak about Polish cinema.
Yeah.
And to give some context, it was quite complicated moment for Poland. I think all the moments for Poland were complicated, probably for all the countries. But you had to make one country, functioning country, made of parts of 3 other countries.
Yes.
So there were 3 legal systems, 3 railway networks. For example, Russia still has different width of rails than other countries. So you had to, orchestrate it. 3 currencies, 3 tax systems. Everything was different. So we had to stitch it into one country, which was very complicated.
Right.
Economically very complicated. Poland was very multi-ethnic. This new state was very multi-ethnic, because it was 14% Ukrainians and Ruthenians or Belarusians, 10% Jews, some Germans, other minorities. For some years, even the borders weren't really set.
Well defined then.
well defined because it took like let's say a couple of years to arrange all those. With most important, the Polish-Soviet War, because Soviet Union attacked Poland in 1918. So it finished. We managed, luckily, to fight them and defeat them in the Battle of Warsaw in 1920s. And that's in 1921. This is the moment that eastern borders of Poland were set. So even if you said about cinemas in Poland, it's very difficult to say because some parts were very like the gray side. So so there was this new country, and it started to rebuild itself. And part of it was building a new film industry, which was quite complicated because, as we all know, already in 1920s, the world cinema started to be dominated by Hollywood. However, in 1920s, it wasn't fixed yet. But, for example, German films were really monopolistic, and there was no big investors to found Polish film business. So it was quite difficult to start a business. And one of the most important companies was this Warsaw Film Company I mentioned before, which started in 1908 in Warsaw.
Okay.
And it became the most important Polish film company in 1920s. 1930s is little bit more complicated. So in the war period in Poland, it's between the First World War until the Second World War, which in Poland started in September 1st, 1939. Okay. So it joins the silent period of the 1920s and sound period 1940s.
Yeah. But then, so talking about, let's say when you say the first film company was the Warsaw Film Company, you mentioned, was Warsaw part of the Soviet Union before the First World War? Like I'm trying to understand which parts
of Russia.
Yeah,
not Soviet Union, but Russia, because there was no Soviet Union then.
Right, and I imagine then the south of Poland was like in part of the Austria, and then
like Kraków was in Austria.
Okay.
And Poznań was in Germany.
Right.
And we didn't have any like north parts of Poland we have now because it was like ethnically very different then.
I see. And
it's
so
Polish, it's complicated. Let's just to map it a little bit. So
and then you said the Treaty of Versailles was where they established like, okay, we need to make a Polish state now. And so who was responsible for setting up Poland? And like, was there like some central entity in Warsaw maybe that was like, okay, this is now the Polish government?
Again, it was quite complicated because, there were some political parties before the First World War, some political leaders. And first they like acted together to reinstate Polish state. But when it started to exist, you had normal political clashes who will govern. So the really first Polish government wasn't in Warsaw, and it was socialist government. However, like the political, we need another meeting for political history of Poland. It's very complicated, and I think we don't need it here now.
Yeah, makes sense.
It's just important to say that it was supposed to be a democratic country, but it was a new democracy, so like it didn't work it didn't work perfectly.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. Well, so getting to now, so we talked about interwar for a bit, and now let's talk about the cinema part of interwar Polish cinema. So just what was happening in cinema at the time? I know that there was, so like, not only am I a beginner in Polish cinema, but I'm also actually a beginner in cinema in general. So I don't know about I know that period between 1920 and 1939 was when the first movies were made with sound, right? So that happened around then. Like, could you tell us about the landscape of all that?
Yes. The first important thing we need to point out, I think, is this concept of early cinema.
Okay.
Which is early cinema is from the 1890s, from the first screenings until more or less the end of the First World War. It's quite blurry, but we call it early cinema because those films were very different from the films we know now. For example, that's why they are sometimes called the cinema of attraction. Like, U.S. scholar Tom Gunning introduced this term in the early 90s, and it got really popular because it indicates the difference between early cinema and later film. Because the film we know now is the film that tells stories.
Right.
And the early film wasn't focused on telling stories, but showing compelling images, attractions.
I see.
And they were very short films which were not narrative, but rather spectacular. And the other kind of this film we knew now, Tom Gunning named the cinema of narrative integration.
Okay.
So the transition from early cinema to the cinema of narrative integration is the moment where there's the birth of the film we know now, and that tells stories, narratives, presents narratives, and that happened around 1920. Like David Wark Griffith is indicated in those as a classical director who introduced this elaborate modes of narrations. So the first important thing which happened in 1920s is that films started to tell stories, like the birth of the feature film.
Right.
And only the second important thing is the sound. Sound was an addition, and sometimes it's presented as a really revolutionary point. But in my opinion, the more revolutionary is the moment when the films start to tell stories. Then it's just sound edit in the 1920s, first in the United States, then globally. It was introduced not in a very linear way in the 1930s. Maybe coming to the sound cinema, we can move it for the next question. So the birth of narrative cinema in 1920s, the birth, the coming of sound in 1930s, and the birth of Hollywood. And this is also a very important moment. Because Hollywood, the biggest film industry in the world, at the moment, perhaps now, but it changes quite quickly. I don't know. Developed this very special mode of production films. Mode of production is an economic term. It was introduced to cinema by American scholars from Wisconsin in classical Hollywood cinema, David Bordwell, Kirsten Thompson, and Janet Steiger. And they showed how cinema developed this industrial mode of production. I don't know if the concept of Fordism is familiar.
No. I'm not sure.
Fordism is a mode of production of assembly line, which was introduced and made famous by Henry Ford and Model T, which is standardized way of manufacturing goods. And that's what Hollywood introduced, this industrialized mode when you had everything standardized. The scripts, the cameras, the lighting, the editing, everything was standardized because it was cheaper that way. Standardization reduces costs. It's I'm an economic historian also. I'm interested in the economic history of film, so I bring it up because I think it's really important. And Bordwell and Steiger and Thompson showed how this mode of production influenced the style of the films.
Right.
Which is called the classical Hollywood film style, because you have this standard aspects of film scripts and film narrative, which are still important today. For example, the ways of editing. Establishing the types of shots, types of editing techniques,
Yeah.
genres, the structure of the script.
Yeah.
I mean, opening sense and climax and resolution.
Yeah. Yeah.
Everything. It was also standardized and very connected to this mode of production.
Wow.
And this will, model proved to be quite effective and expanded globally, and also expanded into Poland. However, 1920s in Poland, for all the interwar period, Polish cinemas were dominated by foreign films.
Really?
Yes, of course.
Okay.
Local production wasn't very
Well set up, I guess.
well set up. It wasn't a big scale of it, but I think
Yeah.
we can return to it in a second.
Yeah.
But 1920s, it was very mixed. Like a lot of German films, a lot of Swedish films, French films, of course, at the beginning, and then around end of 1920s, the Polish market starts to be dominated by Hollywood, and 1930s is very the domination of the United States, very, very visible.
I see.
And everything is connected because from the perspective of the viewer, this is also the perspective of this new cinema history. I think I'm related to as a film scholar, which is focused not only on films or film art, but all entire cinema. So also the audiences and cinemas. So I think when we talk about Polish cinema, it's very important to put yourself in the perspective of the cinema goer. So if you are a cinema goer in the Polish Poland, 1920s or 1930s, you can choose between mostly foreign films. So the experience of I think the experience of Polish cinema goer is also important part of Polish film history.
Yes.
And it puts really a different perspective then. So Polish cinema was international cinema from this perspective. But
that is
to make it more complicated, but maybe you could focus me on some specific topic.
Sure. I mean, I think you've touched on so many interesting topics there. It seems like I've discovered something like a whole new world almost, which I never imagined it would be. Maybe I thought it would be more straightforward. Cinema came to Poland, and then it would be these movies, these productions, and so on and so forth. But this is so fascinating. I didn't know.
But it's more academic perspective. If you take any Polish history of cinema, it won't be explained like that. That's maybe not my personal perspective, but it's not the dominant way of thinking about history of Polish cinema.
I see, but it's incredibly fascinating. So when you say, let's talk about these three changes, right? So change one would be from, I guess, let's call it maybe documentary or documental cinema to narrative cinema, right? I forgot the terms you mentioned.
You mean the cinema of attractions, yes?
Yes, of attractions. And so you go from that to cinema of narratives and
narrative integration, yes.
Narrative integration. Did that happen in Poland as well?
Yes, of course.
At some point?
It was a process, not one point, but around 1908, also in Poland, this Sphinx company in Warsaw started to produce narrative films.
Okay.
And it's also important, I think, to mention that there were some advantages of being part of a Russian market because it's a huge country. So films manufactured in Warsaw could be distributed all over the Russian Empire.
Yeah.
And around 1908, one of the most important films was The Abyss, or The Avgrunden, with Asta Nielsen, Swedish, later German actress, which revolutionized film distribution model also because it started to. In the early periods, you bought a tape, a reel, and you had the object, so you had the right to use this object.
Right.
So no rental model as we know today. This rental model started with Asta Nielsen films. It was called Monopoly Films. And the cinema or the distributor bought not physical copies, but the rights to distribute films over a certain time, over a certain period. So those Asta Nielsen films, Abyss specifically was crucial in this development of these narrative films. So Asta Nielsen was also the first film star, global film star. So it was really influential on many levels, and it really influenced also local production in Poland. And this is my argument. It's debatable, but I'm really convinced it's like that. This screen figure that Asta Nielsen constructed, which was a vamp, femme fatale, really influenced the local, and the sensational melodrama also as a genre started then. And it really influenced Alexander Herz from the Sphinx Company to make if Asta Nielsen melodramas were so successful, so let's try this locally. Sphinx started to make copies of these films, with the same kinds of plots, the same kind of characters, and so on.
Formula, kind of.
Like formula. And that's how they found, Alexander Herz found for this Polish Asta Nielsen. He found a local girl in a theater, a very young one, which was called Pola Negri. I don't know if you are familiar.
No, I'm not sure.
Name. So Pola Negri, she debuted in 1914 in Polish film The Slave of Senses. But then in 1917, she left for Berlin, and she worked for a very famous director, Ernst Lubitsch, which is one of the most important ones, like, for example, the film Madame du Barry. And in 1922, she became the first European actress signed by the major Hollywood studios.
Oh, wow. And she's Polish.
So she's Polish. So before Greta Garbo or Marlena Dietrich, there was Pola Negri.
Oh, wow.
And she was like a star in 1920s. Then, as many actors, in 1930s, her career stopped because she had a really strong Polish accent. So, Hollywood didn't like it. But that's what first, Sphinx introduced Pola Negri to cinema, and Pola Negri is very important in world cinema history of the time. And they started to make those narrative films, and it was the only company that existed in the early new Republic of Poland, and still had production capabilities.
And they were production, but also doing distribution.
Yes, and they had some cinemas, but not many. But you got more money from distribution than production, actually, in this model. So distribution was very important.
That's the profit part. That makes sense. I see.
Of course, films were also profitable, but they were they produced one film a year, so they had to make the business sustainable in a different way.
This podcast is a part of Polish Cinema for Beginners, a project by the Wrocław Film Foundation, bringing Polish cinema closer to international audiences. It's co-produced by Academic Radio LUZ, with special thanks to their Department of Culture. Okay, so now that we're already kind of talking about Polish cinema, you can tell me more about... So in this period, 1920 to 1939, so there was Sphinx, which was the production and distribution company. There was the Warsaw Film Company or Institute that you mentioned?
Sphinx was in Warsaw.
Okay. Is this? Okay. And so was that the Polish film industry, or how?
No. It was... it's very interesting and it tells a lot when we compare it to this Hollywood mode of production, which was large-scale industrial standardized production. In these terms, in 1920s, we had cottage mode.
Okay.
of production. I don't know if this is communicative, this word, cottage mode of
I think that
production.
makes sense. I think that gives some sort of idea.
Mm.
Yes.
So this cottage mode of production, I mean, it's not a big studio. They didn't even have this like buildings, facilities.
Mm-hmm.
They had rented, they were shooting in open space, like outside, or in rented rooms. There
Right,
were
right.
no companies. The companies didn't have any staff, actually. I
Wow.
mean, uh, it was just the owner and that's it. So there's a lot of these small companies which had some projects. Like
Mm-hmm.
film was a project, not a sustainable business. And most of the companies made only one film, maybe two films, and
Right,
went
right.
bankrupt. So entire Polish film industry in 1920s and 1930s. However, in 1930s it became more
Industrialized or
industrialized, let's say, but not
yeah.
yet. Nothing
Okay.
compared to Germany.
Right.
But there were like a lot of small companies with no like Hollywood had uh, contracted stars, contracted actors, and so on,
Mm-hmm.
contracted directors. Nothing of that kind in Poland.
I
So
see.
entire Polish film business was dependent on Polish entertainment industry.
I see.
Actors were working in theaters.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Set designers were working for like theaters. The the script writers were working for theaters or
Yeah, yeah.
literature. So if not for that, it wouldn't exist because they didn't have enough resources to establish this sustainable big business like in the United States. So
Yeah, yeah.
1920s, there was a lot of small projects, very cheap one. So making film in 1920s was quite cheap
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't have this entire infrastructure,
Yeah, yeah.
especially the sound, which was made films in 1920s very expensive.
Right,
So
right,
you
right.
didn't have special lights, you didn't have need the microphones,
Yeah.
you didn't need studio. You
Just
could
a camera.
develop the film in your basement in a
Right.
bucket and take scissors and make a film of it and then copy it. So there are a lot of
Amazing.
companies or projects that made films in 1920s. And actually, we don't know much about it. We
Mm-hmm.
only know titles because 90% of those films don't
Don't exist.
exist.
Yeah.
Most of them didn't succeed, so were just made in one or two copies.
Yeah.
And so we don't
I
know how
see.
it looked. There are some, of course, films that from the 1920s that survived, but in general, we don't know how it worked
I
in
see.
1920s. And there were some companies, and in 19 and they started to professionalize in 1930s. So 1930s, there's actually a lot of small film production companies
Mm-hmm.
and some big. Alexander Hertz died in 1928. That marks actually the end of silent era symbolically in Poland,
Yeah.
and we came into like different business and different cinema in the 1930s.
I see. That is very fascinating. That yeah, you had this like big period of like independent filmmakers basically,
Mhm.
like who would just go out, gather maybe their friends, maybe just I don't know, people around. And then where would they show these? How was the like cinema scene in Poland?
Poland was quite poorly urbanized country,
Mm-hmm.
so there were not many cities, and in the 1920s, many places didn't even have electricity.
Yeah,
So the cinema was like urban thing. In the
I
biggest
see.
cities in Poland, there were really many really luxurious cinemas. In Warsaw, in Poznań, in Łódź, in Kraków, in Wilno, in Lwów. This was the
Yeah,
most
yeah.
important cinema cities. Wrocław was not in Poland.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's,
I was gonna
let's
ask.
remember this. It was Germany. And so most of the film cinema going was this urban thing.
Mm-hmm.
There were some cinemas in smaller towns, but they were like sometimes not working on a weekly basis, but just weekend ones.
Okay.
And there was a really large parts of the country, especially in the east. There was like thousands and thousands square kilometers without any cinema.
Wow.
So it was really uneven, but mostly urban phenomenon.
Yeah.
And then the 1930s came, and the sound, which for a cinema owner, it's quite complicated because
Yeah.
you have to buy this sound system,
Yeah.
which was not only the technique, but also a license. So, for example, from like Western Electric or some German companies, like United States and Germany dominated this market. So it's a huge investment. So not some cinemas were still silent in 1937, because we need to remember also we have this great economic depression early 30s, which made so many people like very poor. And so I think it's also important to remember that that sound came to cinema in around 1930. It doesn't mean that everything was from this beginning, like there was only a sound cinema. Still in 1937 or 1938, in some like distant, remote areas of Poland, some cinemas were still silent.
Yeah.
No sound.
Crazy. And was it like, how long did it take for, not in the cinemas itself, but in the Polish film industry? So like the first sound films were, like movies with sound were around 1926, 1927 in the world. How long did it take for like it to be adopted into Poland?
In this canonical textbooks, you can read that first sound film is Jazz Singer. I mean, global American film is Jazz Singer from 1927, which wasn't actually fully sound film because it was a silent film with some synchronized sound parts.
Okay.
That's how it worked for some years. And the first Polish talkie was Moralność Pani Dulskiej from 1930s. And it also wasn't this kind of, because talkie is a 100% sound. Like the film, when we think about sound film, we think of film where people talk and we can hear what they say. So the first sound films weren't like that. They had just synchronized part. And then they came this 100% talkies with like full sound. So Moralność Pani Dulskiej was also not this not 100% film. And later after that, sound films came. And what I think is important to mention is that, you know, you have this cottage industry, film industry in Poland, and global monopolist Hollywood. So how to compete with Hollywood? When you don't have this kind of resources. And this is very interesting in Poland because compared to other countries of this size, like in 1930s, we had really quite extensive film production. And I think that like the Polish, they found this niche, which is, of course, Polish language. Like most of the people in Poland didn't know English. And they couldn't read. So those don't work. And the dubbing wasn't very developed because it was expensive. So when you can understand what they talk in the film, it's this from as they call it in marketing, unique selling proposition. So that's the Polish cinema goers wanted to see Polish films. And again, we return to this issue of the lack of resources. You can't make a costume film because it's expensive. Hollywood does it better, like pirate films or Western films. You can't do slapstick comedy because it's very complicated, like choreography, for example. And very complicated script to make it funny, to make it smooth, and the editing needs to be very detailed, so it's expensive. So there was not this kind of genre. There were some tries, but not the dominant genres in Polish sound film in the 1930s were melodramas and musical comedies.
I see.
So melodrama, you have this story usually adapted from some pulp fiction, when they men and women, because that's the time they wanted to be together. They are in love, but something's in between, class or some other people, classical melodrama.
Yeah.
So from the perspective of contemporary viewer, even for me, and I'm interested in this kind of cinema, they are really boring. Because some people are standing on the screen and they talk, and it's not very dynamic. But those films were really popular, and it was my important part of Polish film production of 1930s, because it could compete with Hollywood cinema.
Right.
With Polish context, Polish language, and they weren't so expensive because you could use like existing interiors, for example, palaces or castles and so on. So no need for like expensive scenography or set design. And the other genre was musical comedy, and it succeeded from the same reasons, because viewers couldn't understand jokes in English or songs in English.
But they would still watch these, right? Because you mentioned that a lot of these were,
But actually, nobody made exact statistics where, like on imports, but they existed, But I think they like the pirate movies or like this kind of spectacular adventure films were more popular.
Makes sense.
Because you didn't need to understand the language. And comedy, like humor, is complicated.
Yes.
If somebody like falls down, you can laugh. But if it's a spoken joke, it makes it more complicated. So it really worked, and it was really popular, and it was also cheap, because, as I mentioned before, cinema could have this back resource of entertainment and industry, like cabarets, burlesque theaters, this performative arts, and it was really important business. So you had trained singers, trained musical bands, trained composers, trained script writers. Everything, you could use it on a film. And they were really professionals and top class, so they were really good. So those musical comedies were second important part of Polish film industry. And in contrast to melodramas, I don't know for like non-Polish speakers how does it look, but they still really attractive, because they are like singing, they are dancing, it's funny, and that's still for it. It can be attractive for contemporary viewer. So those two most important genres for Polish cinema. Maybe we could also mention Yiddish cinema as a kind of separate thing, but I don't know if
we can. If we have that.
So this is also a very interesting phenomenon, because, as I said, we had very large Jewish community in Poland, but also there was this Jewish community in the United States.
Yeah.
And it was much cheaper to make film in Poland than in the United States. Film in Yiddish, of course. Native is, because we had in Poland in Europe we have Sephardic Jews, which were on the West Europe, and Ashkenazi Jews, which were living in the east of Europe.
Right.
And they spoke Yiddish, their own language. And those Jews, a lot of them emigrated to the United States in the 19th century later, and they was like constituted the majority of Jewish diaspora in the United States.
Yeah.
And very often they also didn't speak very well English.
Right.
So there was some kind of this is very important part of Polish film production, which were films in Yiddish, which could be targeted to Polish audience, but also you could distribute them in the United States. So it was like there's very like one of the most important Polish art Jewish films is the Book from 1937 by Michał Waszyński, and this film survived, so we can see it. It's a very interesting one artistically. and it's a little bit like expressionism, this art style, like Dr. Caligari, for example, this style in Germany. And Michał Waszyński is one of the most important Polish film directors. He was Jewish, but he was directing mostly Polish films. So he directed 37 films out of around 150s that were made in 1930s.
Oh, wow. So it's a big chunk of...
Yeah. Other film, Jewish film, is it's the title in Yiddish. It's Yidel mit dem Fiddle.
Okay.
From 1936. Let me check the English title. The English title is also a little bit unclear because it's Yidel with his fiddle.
Okay.
Yidel is a name. In Poland, the title is Judel gra na skrzypcach, which means Judel plays his violin.
Right.
And it is a musical Yiddish film from 1936 directed by Joseph Green. And it started by, they brought a Yiddish movie star from Hollywood, from United States to Poland, Molly Picon. And Molly Picon starred in this film, and it was distributed in Poland and in the United States. That was the business idea. Of course, other Yiddish diaspora. So it's important also to mention the separate part of Polish film industry, which was the Yiddish language films.
Nice. And you mentioned, what was his name again? Michał Waszyński?
Michał Waszyński, yes.
Yeah, so him and Pola Negri, they are like...
There's a wonderful documentary on Michał Waszyński, which was released like 5 years ago. It's really worth seeing. Yeah.
Okay. I will definitely be taking a look at that. But I wanted to ask, like, what were the other big names in this era when it comes to Polish cinema, specifically?
In this traditional perspective of film art, we are focused on directors.
Right.
The directors are the most important creative factors behind the scene.
Yeah.
Actually, not very often it was that way in Poland, because it was really producer-led industry. The producer had an idea for a film, he contracted the script, and he contracted the director. So the creative influence of director wasn't very important very often. It was just like logistics.
Yeah.
So I think we need really to remember about these film producers, not only directors and film stars.
Yeah.
I don't know which one would you like me to
You can mention maybe the producers then.
So maybe like Marek Lipkov, most of them were Jewish. Marek Lipkov, for example, was an important person in this business. Also, this famous Polish film star Eugeniusz Bodo also had his own production company.
That name is very familiar.
Yeah, he was one of the greatest stars in Polish cinema. It would be, I don't know, is it sense like the list of names most included. So I would like just to mention those that the producers are also worth naming.
Yeah.
Maybe we could also like mention, because we had this official film industry, and we had kind of 1920s independent cinema. So there's a new. I wrote a book about these film clubs in the 1930s. So it started. It wasn't very important or extensive as kinds of productions, but like some kind of art cinema started to flourish in 1930s with a new kind of new generation of directors. Some of them were also important after the Second World War, like very famous, like Alexander Ford. Wanda Jakubowska or the cinematographer Stanisław Woll. and they started to make their first films in the 1930s, and they were very important after the war. Because, for example, Alexander Ford, he was after the war, Second World War, he was for some time chief of the state Polish film company, and he made this film Krzyżacy, which was huge production, very expensive. It was a period film from the medieval times, and I think it was the first color Polish film.
Okay.
Oh, sure, the first such a big color Polish film.
Yeah.
Wanda Jakubowska was the first director to make a film about Holocaust after the camps, and so on. They were quite important. There's this new generation of art cinema, and because it was like a very short period between 1933 and 1939, they didn't have time to develop because there were outbreak of the war.
Yeah.
But they started then.
Well, so a couple more questions. So when you mentioned your book, so these were the people who made the Start Society kind of thing?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and this is the Society of Filmmakers? Or
No, it was the society mostly. It was kind of a counterpart to those what happened like in France already in 1930s, 20s, which is a cine club.
Oh,
so
okay.
People who are interested in film as an art,
Right.
not as an entertainment.
Okay.
So they were really interested in art film, and they were really fed up with the films that you could see in Poland.
Right.
Because you had this musical comedies.
Yeah.
You had this stupid melodramas.
Yeah.
And Polish film was a crap for them. And what was imported was also just entertainment. So they were really fed up that you can't see in Poland those important art films. And they were very frustrated that Polish film industries make such a bad films. They had a conflict because those film industries said, but we can't sell art film. We can't sell what we make. So come on, you are in Poland, not in Paris. So you can't expect art cinema in Poland.
Yeah.
But they wanted it. And they were frustrated with the cinema goers because they didn't want to watch art films. So they started a film club to promote this kind of art cinema idea. And so most of the members were people who wanted to see films, not to make films. And they were really prominent figures. They were young students actually at the moment. Right. But after the war, some of them were really prominent figures in Polish society at all. And the Start Society finished it operating in 1935 around. Let's not be so strict about dates.
Yeah.
And those of them who wanted to make films, like Ford or Jakubowska, they started. They don't have English Wikipedia site. That's sad. But they found in 1935 Spółdzielnia Autorów Filmowych, which can be translated as Film Authors Cooperative.
Right.
So they found a filmmakers cooperative.
Okay.
And they wanted to make some films. Mostly they made short films because it was cheaper. But they started also to make some feature films like Strache from 1938. And this is a film that I had a lecture on recently in Wrocław.
Nice.
Which is an adaptation of a novel about sailors working on Vistula River in Poland. So because they were interested not in this silly escapistic cinema, but to depict realistic social life of Poland. So, for example, those Strache by Eugeniusz Cenkalski from 1938, and this film exists, and it's possible to see it. I don't know what's the English title. There's no official title, but let's say The Fears.
Yeah.
But it's a film that it's depicting kind of a musical theater scene in provincial Poland.
Okay.
But it's not like those silly comedies, but there are some like really serious stuff. It's about serious stuff, not to go into details. And another film by this cooperative were made just before the war.
Mm-hmm.
And actually they made some films, but they were like lost during the Second World War. So nobody's seen them ever. So,
well, that brings us kind of like to, like a lot of times, like it is a turbulent period, and there was cinema was just starting, and like you mentioned, so many films were lost. And that brings us back to today's age, or these years now, and to you, that how was it like researching all this? Like, how was it? Did you have a lot of issues finding information or records and stuff?
First things is like how to research history of cinema when you can't watch films.
Yeah.
Because there are two factors we can't see those films. First is technological, because a film in 1920s was shot and copied on nitrate stock, which because of this, its chemical qualities deteriorated.
Right.
And you can't stop it.
Right.
Often this even leads to like self-ignition or self-combustion.
Oh, okay.
So like out of a blue, the film copy starts to burn.
Right. I think we've seen this in... Is that the same thing what happened in like the Cinema Paradiso, the Italian movie? I think they just caught fire. Maybe it was the projector or the film. I don't know.
Actually, I don't remember. In 1930s and later, there was a different kind of stock, which was not so flammable.
Yeah. But you can
still, it was quite easy to burn. But it because just of the chemical feature of this stock, it could like fire. So, like Library of Congress estimates that 75% of silent films globally
just gone.
Are gone.
Oh no!
Like Deutsche Kinemathek says it's even like 19%.
Wow!
So
huge loss.
19% of films before 1929 are lost, and it's like all over the world. If they weren't copied in the right moment, they are lost.
Right.
And other factor is like local one. Second World War led to like destruction of films, studios, archives, posters, cinemas, everything. Like entire Warsaw was like leveled down. Most of part of the film industry was in Warsaw. So we don't have access to it. And even those films which are still preserved in Polish films from 1930s, they, for example, those musical comedies, it's because they were also distributed in the United States. Right. Because we had also huge Polish diaspora in the United States. So some copies were sent overseas. And also, like Franciszek Starczewski, which was one of the most important distributors of Polish films in 1930s in the United States, just kept those films.
Right.
We sent those films back to Polish film archives, and that's why how they were preserved, because locally they got destroyed.
So these would still be the bigger films that were saved, let's say, because they were in the United States and everywhere.
Yes. And the Polish Film Archive makes a wonderful job in restoring and digitizing those films. So I really recommend to check their websites, and you can see many of those films online.
Nice.
And you can compare melodramas to musical comedies and assess on your own how they present themselves now. So my research is mostly based on press, daily press and trade press, because there were many copies of them and a lot of cinema. But for example, as I'm interested in this economic dimensions, it's a tragedy for me that the company archives also don't exist.
Oh no.
So we don't know the budgets.
Right.
We don't know how much they earned or lost. We can't say that. It's a pity.
That's a loss. But
Mm.
it's still amazing that you've done so much research on the topic, and like there is still so much knowledge to be found. But yeah.
I always use the metaphor, like an archaeologist excavates in some like ancient Rome, some broken vase.
Yeah.
And he sticks together those parts of the vase. So it's more or less a vase.
Yeah.
But there are some parts missing.
Yeah.
We will never feel it. That's what I do actually with this kind of my research, I think. It will never be complete.
Yeah, but that's a very amazing metaphor. And I think it's a good note to end the conversation on. So thank you once again, Łukasz, for coming on the podcast.
Pleasure to be here.
It's very enlightening. And I loved our conversation.
If anybody is interested in like hearing me live and on like public lecture, I'm open to propositions. Maybe that's what I could suggest.
Amazing. So thank you once again, and thank you to the listeners for listening to the podcast so far. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. Thanks to Krystyna Szpunt and Aleksandra Kabala for producing, Szymon Lazar, Zofia Skutnik, and the Radio LUZ team for their studio, audio engineering and editing, and Agnieszka Smutek for promo and communications from the Wrocław Film Foundation. Feel free to write to us with your thoughts at Polish Cinema on Instagram, and check out more of Radio LUZ at radio_luz, that's LUZ, and don't stop watching movies.